The wind was strong that morning, and the sky was painted with the soft colors of sunrise as Myra walked down the dusty path toward the stables, her heart full of hope and excitement, because today she was finally going to prove herself to everyone in the village. She had always dreamed of riding a horse one day, not just any horse, but a great one that could run like lightning through the open fields. For as long as she could remember, Myra had loved horses. She would watch them from far away behind the wooden fence, her eyes wide with wonder as they moved with such strength and grace. Her father used to tell her that horses could sense fear and kindness both, and Myra always thought that maybe they could also sense love. But not everyone in the village was kind to her. The stable boys often made fun of her. They called her names and laughed whenever she talked about horses. They thought she was just a silly farm girl who dreamed too big. One of them, a tall boy named Ruffy, said, "One day let her see how brave she really is." And his friends grinned. They whispered to each other with cruel smiles, forming a plan that would make them laugh and make her cry. The nobleman who owned the stables had many horses, but one was different. His name was Blaze, and people said he was mad. They said Blaze had thrown every rider who tried to sit on him. They said he bit and kicked and broke everything near him. No one went near Blaze without fear in their eyes. Even the stable master warned everyone never to touch him. But Ruffy and the others decided that Blaze would be the perfect horse for their little trick. They told Myra that there was a gentle horse waiting for her, a calm one who just needed a kind hand. They said that if she could ride him, she might even get a job at the stables. Myra's eyes shone bright with excitement. She thanked them again and again, not knowing that their kindness was only a lie. When she reached the stable yard, she could feel her heart beating fast. Her hands trembled a little, but she told herself it was only because she was nervous. She looked around at the rows of horses, their brown eyes watching her curiously. The boys pointed toward the far end where a tall black horse stood alone, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. With every breath, Ruffy smiled and said that his shadow, he is gentle but shy, go slowly, and he will trust you. Myra took a deep breath and walked forward. The ground beneath her boots was soft and warm from the sun. Blaze lifted his head when he saw her, his nostril flaring, his body tense. She whispered softly, "Hello there, Shadow. It is all right. I am your friend." She reached out her hand slowly, her voice calm and gentle. But deep inside her, something felt wrong. There was too much fire in the horse's eyes, too much anger for a calm one. The boys watched from behind the fence, whispering and laughing quietly. One of them said she will run any moment now. Another replied, "No, she will fall. Wait." And see Myra move closer, her heart pounding. She could almost touch Blaze's face when suddenly he jerked his head back, snorted loud, and kicked the wooden gate. It creaked open with a crash. The horse burst forward like a storm, his men there flying, his eyes blazing red with fury. The world seemed to spin around Myra. She stumbled back with her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen such power before. Blaze ran in circles around her, hooves striking the ground like thunder. The boys shouted from behind, "Careful, Myra. He is just excited." Their laughter mixed with the sound of the raging horse. Myra froze for a moment, fear rising inside her like a cold wave. But then she remembered her father's words, "Horses can feel your heart. If you fear them, they will fear you too." She took a slow step forward, whispering again, "It is all right. I am not here to hurt you." Blaze stopped for half a second, his ears flicking toward her. Then suddenly he reared up, his front legs high in the air. Myra gasped and fell to the ground, her knees scraping against the dirt. Pain shot through her legs, but she refused to cry. Blaze galloped past her, his hooves missing her by inches. Dust filled the air, and everything went silent except the sound of a heartbeat. The boys were no longer laughing. They were staring wide-eyed. One of them whispered, "I told you he was mad." Myra lay there, breathing hard, her dress torn, her hands shaking. She looked at Blaze, standing at the edge of the yard, his body still trembling, his eyes full of something strange, not just rage, but pain, deep pain that spoke without words. She pushed herself up slowly and said softly, "You are not mad at you. Something happened to you." Ruffy stepped forward, pretending concern. "Are you hurt, Myra?" he asked, his voice hiding his guilt. She shook her head, wiped the dust from her face, and said in a steady voice, "No, I am fine." But her eyes never left Blaze, who was still watching her like he wanted to say something. That night the village talked about her. They said she had been foolish to go near the mad horse. They laughed and told stories, but Myra sat alone by her window, listening to the distant sound of Blaze neighing under the moonlight, his cry echoing through the hills and into her heart. She could not sleep. She kept thinking about his eyes, that fire, that sorrow, and the feeling that there was more to the story than anyone knew. And deep inside her she made a promise that she would return to him no matter what they said, no matter how dangerous they called him. She would find out the truth behind the mad horse named Blaze. The sun rose slowly over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft pink. While the village began to wake from its quiet sleep, Myra sat outside her small cottage, her hands still aching from yesterday, her knees covered with bandages, her eyes fixed on the distant stable. She could still hear the echo of Blaze's cry in her mind, wild and haunting like a memory that refused to fade. Her mother had begged her not to go back to the stables, but Myra's heart would not listen. She felt something inside her calling her, a strange pull that drew her toward that black horse that everyone feared. She whispered to herself again and again, "He is not mad. I saw it in his eyes. He is hurt, not evil." As the morning breeze brushed her face, Myra stood up and began walking toward the stables. The village dogs barked as she passed, and the people who saw her whispered quietly, "There goes the foolish girl who tried to ride the mad horse." But Myra kept her eyes forward, her steps steady, her heart beating faster with every breath. When she reached the gate of the stables, the boys were already there polishing saddles and feeding the other horses. They looked up and smirked. Ruffy laughed and said, "Well, look who came back for more. Are you planning to get kicked again, Myra?" She ignored their words and walked straight past them, her voice calm but firm. "I came to see Blaze." The stable master, an older man with gray hair and tired eyes, shook his head gently. "Myra, that horse is not safe," he said, his voice filled with concern. "He is beyond saving. He has thrown 10 men. And nearly killed 2. Myra looked at him and said softly, "Maybe he just needs someone who will not give up on him." The old man sighed, but did not stop her. As Myra stepped into the stable, she felt the air grow heavy. The smell of hay and sweat mixed with something sharp like fear. Blaze stood at the far end behind thick wooden bars, his coat shining like black fire, his eyes restless, his breath coming out in short bursts. When he saw her, he pawed the ground and snorted hard. Myra felt a shiver run through her, but she did not step back. She spoke to him softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not here to hurt you, Blaze. I just want to understand you." The horse tilted his head for a moment, and then turned away, his tail swishing against the wall. Myra noticed the scars on his legs, thin white lines that told stories of pain and struggle. She wondered who had hurt him and why. Behind her, the boys were whispering again. One of them said she will learn her lesson today. Another said maybe Blaze will end this nonsense once and for all, but Myra could not hear them anymore. Her world was only the horse and the quiet space between them. She took one step forward, then another, the straw rustling beneath her boots. Blaze turned suddenly, his eyes sharp like flames, but she did not flinch. She held out her hand and said, "You remember me, don't you? I did not run from you yesterday." Blaze stared at her for a long time, his ears twitching. Then he took one slow step closer, his breath warm and strong against her fingers. For a brief second, everything went still. Even the wind outside seemed to stop. Myra smiled gently and said, "That's a good boy," but the sound of a door slamming behind her broke the moment. The boys had shut the gate, and Blaze, startled, rearing up in fear. Myra stumbled back as the horse neighed loud as hooves, striking the ground. The stable shook, and the boys laughed from behind the door, shouting, "Look, she is trapped with a mad one now." Myra's heart pounded. She pressed her back against the wall, but she refused to scream. She whispered, "It's all right, Blaze, it's all right. I am not your enemy." Slowly, Blaze stopped his while, kicking, his breath coming heavy, his eyes darting around the small stall. Then he lowered his head just slightly, and Myra took that chance. She reached out her hand again, this time touching his mane gently, her fingers trembling. He did not move away. Outside, the boys grew silent. They could not believe what they were seeing. Ruffy's face turned pale, and he whispered, "She is touching him. She is really touching him." Myra's heart filled with something she could not explain. It was not just courage. It was connection, the kind that could not be forced or faked. Blaze snorted softly and took a small step toward her. She smiled, tears filling her eyes. "You are not mad, you are lonely," she said softly. The stable door creaked open as the old master stepped in, his eyes wide in shock. "Myra, what have you done?" he asked, his voice shaking. She turned to him with a calm smile. "He trusts me now," she said. The old man looked at Blaze, who was standing quietly beside her, and whispered, "I do not believe it." That night when Myra returned home, the stars were bright above her, and her heart felt lighter than ever before. She sat by the window again, listening to the night sounds of crickets, the soft rustle of the wind, and far away the gentle sound of Blaze neighing. It was no longer wild or angry. It was almost peaceful, like a song meant only for her. But deep inside, Myra knew this was only the beginning. She had gained the horse's trust, but not the world's. People still believed Blaze was dangerous, and Ruffy's anger was growing like a shadow in the dark. She could feel that something worse was coming, something that would test her heart, her courage, and her bond with Blaze more than ever before. And as the moon rose higher in the sky, Myra whispered into the night, "I will not let them hurt you again, Blaze. I promise, whatever it takes." The moon hung high in the dark sky, casting silver light over the sleeping village. The night air was cool and quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of an owl. Myra lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind filled with the image of Blaze, his wild eyes, his trembling body, his quiet surrender. She could not stop thinking about him. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him standing alone in the stable, his spirit chained as tightly as his legs. The clock in the old church tower struck 12, and Myra rose from her bed slowly. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside, her bare feet silent. Against the cool ground, the night smelled of hay and mist. The world seemed to sleep. But inside Myra, something had awakened, something that whispered, "Go to him." The road to the stables was long and covered with shadows, but Myra did not feel afraid. She held a small lantern in her hand, the golden light flickering softly with every step she took. The sound of crickets filled the air, and the wind whispered through the tall grass like an old secret. When she reached the gate of the stable, she stopped for a moment, listening. Everything was silent. The horses were sleeping, all except one. From the far end she heard a restless sound, the scraping of hooves against the floor, the heavy breath of a creature that did not know peace. Myra pushed the door open. Slowly the hinges creaked, and the smell of hay grew stronger. Her lantern light fell on Blaze, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark like two burning stars. He snorted when he saw her, his head tossing side to side, his body tense. Myra whispered softly, "Hush, it's just me, Blaze, I am here." The horse stepped back, pawing the ground, his ears twitching as if he was torn between fear and curiosity. Myra took another step forward, her voice gentle like a breeze. "I couldn't sleep, I kept thinking about you." She set the lantern on the floor, its light spilling across the straw. She could see now the marks on his body, deep scars that told a story of pain. She did not know who had done this to him, but she felt anger rise in her chest. How cruel people could be to something so beautiful. Blaze snorted again, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Myra reached into her pocket and pulled out an apple small and red. She held it out toward him, her hand steady though her heart raced. At first Blaze did not move. He stared at her, his eyes wide and uncertain. Then slowly he lowered his head, the sound of his breath filling the quiet room. He sniffed the apple, hesitated, and then with a sudden movement took it from her hand. Myra gasped softly, her eyes shining with wonder. He was eating from her hand. She whispered, "Good boy, that's it, good boy." Minutes passed, and neither moved. Myra sat down on the hay, her knees pulled to her chest. Blaze stood near her, his body still tense, but calmer than before. She began to speak softly, telling him stories about her life, about her father, who once had a horse like him, about the field she dreamed to ride across someday. The horse seemed to listen, his ears turning toward her voice, as if he understood every word. Outside, the night grew deeper, the stars shimmered brighter, and time slipped quietly away. Blaze moved a little closer, his nose brushing against Myra's shoulder. She froze, afraid to scare him off, but he did not move away. He stayed there, breathing slowly, the heat of his body warming the cold air around her. She smiled through tears, whispering, "You're not a monster, you're just broken like me." Suddenly a sound came from outside, a loud knocker with the stable door creaked. Blaze jerked his head up, his muscles tense. Myra turned quickly, her heart racing. She heard footsteps. Someone was there. She blew out the lantern, and the world fell into darkness. Her breath caught as she heard Roffy's voice whispering outside, "I know she's been sneaking in here. Let's see if she still thinks the mad horse is her friend." Myra pressed her back against the wall, holding her breath. Blaze stood alert, his ears flicking toward the sound. The door handle turned slightly, but then stopped. The boys outside laughed softly before walking away, leaving only silence. Once more Myra waited until their voices faded before lighting the lantern again. Blaze was still staring at the door, his nostrils flaring. Myra whispered, "Don't worry, they're gone. You're safe with me." She reached out her hand again and touched his neck, her fingers brushing his mane. It was coarse but warm. She could feel the power that lived inside him, a storm that could either destroy or protect, and for the first time she believed she could be the one to calm that storm. The hours passed, and the sky began to lighten at the edges, the first glow of dawn touching the hills. Myra stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting so long. She looked at Blaze, who was now calm, his eyes soft with trust. She whispered, "I have to go before they see me, but I will come back, I promise." Blaze turned his head as if he understood. When she stepped outside, the morning air kissed her face, and the bird began to sing. She looked back one last time through the crack in the stable door, and saw Blaze watching her silently, the golden light of sunrise falling on his black coat. It shimmered like fire and shadow together. As she walked back toward her home, she felt a strange strength inside her, a new courage she had never known before. She whispered to herself, "He is not just a horse, he is my friend, and I will protect him no matter what happens, no matter who tries to stop me." And far behind her in the quiet stable, Blaze neighed softly, a sound that echoed across the valley like a promise waiting to be kept. The morning sun painted the sky with soft colors of orange and gold as Myra hurried down the hill, her heart beating with quiet excitement, every step echoing with purpose. It had been 1 week since the night she sat beside Blaze in the stable, 1 week since the horse who once terrified her had eaten from her hand. And now she could not stay away. Every sunrise she returned quietly before anyone else woke, her footsteps light as feathers, her eyes glowing with determination. The stable yard was empty, the boys still asleep after their long nights of laughter and talk. Only the old stable master was awake, sweeping the ground slowly. He looked up when he saw her and shook his head gently. "Myra, you are a strange girl," he said, his voice half tired, half amused. "What brings you here so early?" Again she smiled and answered softly, "I came to clean and feed the horses." He nodded, though his eyes showed he knew there was more to her visits than she said. Once he turned away, Myra slipped toward the far end where Blaze waited. The black horse lifted his head when he saw her, his ears flicking forward, his eyes bright but calm, now not wild like before. She whispered, "Good morning, Blaze," and his tail swished gently as if he understood. She entered his stall and began brushing his mane, the brush moving slowly over his glossy coat, each stroke smoother than the last. She could feel the bond between them growing stronger with every breath, every heartbeat. After brushing, she whispered, "Let's try something new today." She took the rope gently and looped it around his neck. Blaze tensed for a moment, then relaxed, his muscles softening under her hand. She led him out into the open yard, the air fresh with the smell of grass and morning dew. She walked slowly, and Blaze followed her steps, matching haze. With surprising grace, she smiled, whispering, "You're doing so well. See, I told you could trust me." Day after day, they practiced together, Myra teaching him to walk beside her, to stop when she stopped to listen. When she spoke, she learned how to move her hands softly, so he would not fear. She learned that patience was stronger than power, and that trust was more precious than fear. Sometimes she would bring him apples or carrots, hiding them in her pockets, just to see his ears perk up with joy when he smelled them. Those small moments made her heart feel light like wings. But the peace did not last forever. One morning, Ruffy noticed her returning from the stable. Her dress dusty, her hair messy. He frowned and asked in a sharp voice, "What were you doing there again?" Myra hesitated before answering. "I was just helping clean the stalls." Ruffy narrowed his eyes and said, "You think you can lie to me when know you've been touching the mad horse?" He stepped closer, his tone mocking. "Do you want to get yourself killed?" Myra glared at him but said nothing. She simply walked past him, her silence louder than any word. Ruffy's anger grew each day as whispers spread around the village. People began to talk about how Blaze had become calmer, how his wild cries no longer echoed through the night. Some said Myra had bewitched the horse, others said it was luck, but Ruffy knew it was more. He had seen her once from afar, walking beside Blaze like they were old friends. Jealousy burned inside him hotter than fire. He decided that if she wanted to play with danger, he would give her more than she could handle. The next morning when Myra came to the stable, she found a rope missing. She frowned and looked around, her heart tightening. The stable master was gone and the boys were nowhere in sight. Blaze stood restless, his eyes wide as breath uneven. She walked closer, whispering, "It's all right, I'm here." Then she saw a new saddle hanging on the fence, the same one they used for training strong horses. Her heart sank as she realized what they had done. Ruffy had loosened the ropes, left the gate open, hoping Blaze would run wild again. She turned just in time to see Ruffy standing behind her, smirking. "Go on, then," he said. "Show us how brave you really are. Ride your precious Blaze. If he loves you so much, maybe he won't throw you like before." His friends laughed and leaned on the fence, waiting for her to fall. But Myra didn't run. She looked at Blaze, whose body trembled not from anger, but confusion. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I trust you, Blaze. Do you trust me?" Slowly she climbed onto his back, her hands shaking slightly, her legs pressing against his sides. Blaze snorted, his muscles tightening, but then he stilled. Myra whispered, "Easy, boy, we can do this together." The boys laughed harder, shouting, "She's madder than the horse." But before they could finish, Blaze began to walk, one careful step, then another. The sound of his hooves soft on the dirt, the laughter behind her faded into stunned silence. Myra sat tall, her eyes forward, the wind touching her face. Blaze moved faster, his steps smoother. She whispered, "Good, Blaze, that's it." And for the first time, he began to trot, his mane flowing behind him like black silk. Her heart raced with pride and joy. She could feel his heartbeat under her. She could feel his spirit free for the first time. When she finally stopped and slid off his back, the yard was silent. The boys stared in disbelief. Ruffy's mouth hung open, his pride shattered. Myra looked at them and said quietly, "He is not mad. He just needed kindness." Then she turned back to Blaze and stroked his face, whispering, "Thank you." As she walked away, she knew the peace wouldn't last. Ruffy's anger would only grow stronger. He had been humiliated in front of everyone, and men like him did not forgive easily. Still, Myra felt no fear. She had Blaze, and Blaze had her. Their bond was stronger than lies, stronger than hate, stronger even than fear itself. That evening when the sun set behind the hills and the world turned golden, Blaze neighed softly from his stall, and Myra smiled, knowing that their story was only beginning. The days passed quickly. After the morning when Myra rode Blaze for the first time, the story spread through the village like fire through dry grass. People whispered a name with awe and disbelief. Some called her brave, others called her foolish, yet everyone wanted to see the girl who had tamed the mad horse. Every dawn Myra came to the stables, her hands gentle, her voice calm. Blaze would greet her with a soft neigh, his eyes warm and bright. Together they trained in secret, learning to move as one. She taught him to follow her every signal with trust and patience. She never raised her voice, never used force. Her kindness was her strength, and Blaze understood her heart like no one else ever had. But not everyone was happy. Ruffy's anger grew darker with each passing day. His pride burned like a wound that refused to heal. He watched Myra from afar, his eyes full of envy and bitterness. He could not accept that the same horse who had nearly killed him now bowed his head to a simple village girl. His friends began to mock him, whispering that Myra was a true horse master, and Ruffy the coward who had run away from his own challenge. One afternoon, as the sun blazed high over the valley, the nobleman himself came to visit the stables. He was tall, with a kind but proud face, dressed in fine clothes, his boots shining like glass. The stable master bowed low, and the boys followed. Myra stood quietly near Blaze, brushing his mane. When the nobleman noticed her, he asked, "Who is that girl?" The master smiled nervously and said, "She is Myra, the one who tamed Blaze." The nobleman raised an eyebrow as his eyes fell on the great black horse standing calm, and still he walked closer, studying Blaze with interest. "I remember this one," he said softly. "This beast was wild as fire, and you say she tamed him?" The master nodded slowly. "It seems so." So the nobleman turned to Myra and said, "You must have courage, girl. Not many can do what you have done." Myra lowered her head humbly. "I only gave him patience, sir, that is all." The nobleman smiled, and after a moment spoke again. "The festival of the harvest is near. There will be a grand race across the valley fields. I wish for Blaze to run in it. He deserves to show his strength to the people, and you, Myra, will ride him." The words hit the air like thunder. The boys gasped. Ruffy's face turned pale, then red with rage. Myra froze, unable to speak. The nobleman smiled again. "You have 5 days to prepare," he said. "I expect to see you both at the starting line." After he left the stable filled with whispers, the boys gathered around Myra, sneering and mocking. "You think you can win that race?" said Ruffy, his voice sharp, "and cruel Blaze will throw you before the first turn." She looked at him calmly, her voice steady. "I will ride him, And we will finish the race whether we win or lose is not what matters." Ruffy laughed loudly. "You'll never make it out alive, girl. Remember my words." And he stormed away, his anger twisting inside him like a storm. That night Mara lay awake, the stars shining bright through her window, her heart heavy with fear and hope mixed together. She whispered softly into the night, "Blaze, we can do this. We must show them who you really are." She knew the race was not just about winning, it was about proving that kindness could heal even the wildest heart. The next days were filled with training from sunrise to sunset. Mara and Blaze ran across the field, their shadows stretching long behind them, the wind whipping through her hair, the rhythm of his hooves like music in her ears. Sometimes she would fall and roll in the dust laughing as Blaze circled her, nudging her gently with his nose. Other times she would cry when he grew restless or frightened, but she never gave up, and neither did he. Together they learned the path of trust and balance. By the 5th day, the village buzzed with excitement. People came from far and near to see the race. Children ran through the streets shouting, "Mara and Blaze will ride the mad horse, the girl who talks the fire." Even the nobleman himself set up a special stand at the finish line to watch the event. Everyone gathered under the bright morning sun, waiting for the race to begin. Mara stood beside Blaze, her hand resting on his neck. She could feel his heartbeat strong and steady under her fingers. Ruffy stood nearby with his own horse, a tall brown stallion that pawed the ground eagerly. He gave Mara a cold smack and whispered, "Try not to fall too soon." She said nothing, only smiled faintly and looked ahead at the long track stretching across the valley, her heart calm, her eyes bright. The horn blew loud, and the horses leapt forward. Blaze surged ahead, his men there flying like black fire. The crowd gasped at his power. The ground thundered beneath them as they raced through the open field. Mara leaned close, whispering, "Go, Blaze, go." The wind roared in her ears. The other riders struggled to keep up. Ruffy pushed his horse hard, his eyes burning with hate. But Blaze moved like lightning, his strength unbroken, his spirit wild yet controlled. Halfway through the race, Ruffy's horse drew close. He shouted, "You won't win, girl." But Mara didn't answer. Blaze ran faster, his hooves pounding the earth with fury. The finish line came into view, the crowd shouting louder and louder. Her heart pounded with pride and fear together. They crossed the last turn, the air thick with dust and noise, and just as they neared the final stretch, something flashed in the sunlight, a sharp glint of metal near the ground. Ruffy had placed something on the track, a trap meant for Blaze, but before Mara could pull the reins, Blaze jumped high, soaring over the danger, his body glowing in the golden light of morning. The crowd gasped in awe as he landed strong and steady, galloping straight toward the finish line, leaving Ruffy far behind. As they crossed the line, the world seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. Then the valley erupted with cheers. Mara smiled, tears in her eyes. Blaze neighed proudly, his spirit finally free. Before the crowd, she whispered softly, "You did it, my brave one." But deep inside, she knew this victory would not end the story, for Ruffy's rage had only begun. The sound of cheering echoed across the valley as Mara and Blaze crossed the finish line together, their shadows stretching long under the golden light of the rising sun. The crowd erupted in wonder. People shouted her name, their voices filled with disbelief and joy. No one had ever seen such a race before. The girl who once was mocked for her dreams had done what no man had dared. She had tamed a mad horse and turned him into a champion. Blaze stood tall, his black coat shining with sweat and sunlight, his eyes calm and proud. Mara leaned forward, resting her forehead against his neck, her heart racing with emotion. She whispered softly, "You did it, Blaze. You showed them all the truth." The nobleman walked toward her, his face glowing with pride, his voice loud so all could hear. "This is not just a victory, this is a miracle," he said, and the people cheered again, clapping and shouting her name. Mara felt her chest fill with warmth, but deep inside she knew something was still unfinished. Among the crowd, Ruffy stood silent, his fists clenched, his eyes full of hate and shame. His trap had failed, his pride had been crushed, and now the people who once laughed with him turned their eyes away from him. He could not bear it. As the cheers grew louder, his anger burned hotter. He stormed away from the race ground, his mind filled with dark thoughts. That evening the village celebrated, torches burned, bright music filled the air, and people danced around the fires. Mara smiled as the children ran around her, asking to touch Blaze. A horse stood quietly beside her, his head lowered as if enjoying the music. But somewhere in the distance Mara saw Ruffy watching from the shadows, his face hard and cold. She felt a chill run through her heart, and whispered to Blaze, "Stay close, my friend." Later that night, when the moon rose high, Mara walked alone to the stables, the laughter of the festival fading behind her. Blaze stood in his stall, his eyes glowing gently in the lantern light. She stroked his mane softly, saying, "We did it, Blaze, but we must be careful now. Jealousy is a dangerous fire." The horse snorted softly. As if agreeing, she smiled faintly and leaned against him, closing her eyes for a moment of peace. But peace did not last long. A sudden crash outside made Blaze lift his head, his ears flicking alert. Mara turned quickly, her heart beating fast. She stepped out of the stable into the cool night air and saw flames in the distance. Fire caught the corner of the barn. Someone had thrown a torch. The dry straw burned fast, and the wind carried the flames closer to the stalls. Her eyes widened in fear. "Ruffy," she whispered, her voice trembling. She knew it was him. No one else would dare. Without a second thought, she ran back inside, shouting for Blaze. "Come on, boy, we have to go." She tried to open the gate, but Blaze hesitated, the firelight reflecting in his eyes, a crackling sound loud. And while Myra coughed as smoke filled the air, the horses neighed in panic, kicking and pulling at their ropes. She reached for Blaze's reins, her voice breaking. "It's all right, Blaze. Trust me one last time, please." With a loud neigh, Blaze pushed forward, his body trembling, but his trust unbroken. He followed Myra through the growing flames. She guided him carefully, shielding her face from the smoke, the heat biting her skin. Behind them, part of the roof began to fall, sparks raining like stars. She cried out. Blaze moved faster now together. They charged through the fire, bursting out into the open yard where the cool night air rushed around them. People from the festival came running with buckets of water, shouting and trying to stop the fire. Myra felt her knees, coughing. Blaze stood beside her, his chest heaving as men their sins, but his eyes alive. The nobleman ran to them and pulled her up. "Are you hurt, girl?" he asked. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Blaze is safe. That's all that matters," she said, her voice weak but proud. The villagers worked through the night until the fire finally died down. The barn was half burned, but Blaze and the other horses had been saved. Roffy was nowhere to be found, though some said they saw him running toward the woods, his shadow disappearing into the darkness, never to return again. When morning came, the sky was soft with light. The air still smelled of smoke, but also of hope. Myra stood beside Blaze, looking at the fields glimmering under the new sun. The nobleman approached her once more and said, "Myra, you are not just a rider. You are a legend. You did not tame the horse with fear or pain. You did it with kindness and courage, something this world needs more than anything else." Myra smiled, though her face was tired. Her eyes shone with quiet pride. She turned to Blaze and stroked his muzzle, whispering, "They called you mad, Blaze, but you were never mad. You were only waiting for someone to listen." The horse lowered his head, gently brushing her shoulder, as if to say thank you. From that day on, people told their children the story of Myra and Blaze. They said she was a girl who spoke the language of hearts, a girl who tamed a storm not with ropes, but with love whenever the wind blew across a valley, and the horses ran free their hooves, striking the earth with thunder. The people would say, "Do you hear that? It is Blaze running with his spirit free and his heart full of peace." And every evening when the sun dipped behind the hills, Myra would walk to the edge of the field, watching the light fade, and whisper to the wind, "We did it, Blaze. We proved them all wrong." And somewhere far away, carried on the breeze, would come a soft neigh like an answer from her loyal friend, reminding her that true courage lives not in strength but in compassion.